리그 오브 기계 공동대표이자 디렉터인 트렌더 커스터스님의 아멜로 열정에서 플랫폼까지 하는 내용으로 발표를 시작하겠습니다. 모두 큰 박수로 맞이해 주시기 바랍니다.
Oh, thank you. All right, I'm not sure if this clicker works, but we'll give it a shot. Oh. It works to get me out of the slideshow. Okay. Let's see. Oh, there we go. All right, I was pressing the wrong button. Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Trent Kusters, and I do a few things. One of them is I'm the chair of Free Play, which is Australia's largest and longest running independent games festival. I'm also slightly involved with academia. I'm a lecturer at VCA. I also wrote the curriculum for their Writing for Games course. I'm on the advisory board for RMIT and have lectured at Swinburne and a number of other universities throughout the years. But what I'm most well known for potentially is League of Geeks. And I'm the co-founder and director of League of Geeks. We are responsible for a title called Armello, which you may or not be familiar with. Armello is I actually was just at PAX West, so I've given this pitch 5,000 times in the last 4 days. So Armello is a digital card and board game where you're off on a quest to become king or queen. So matches last around 30 to 90 minutes, 4 players, 150 animated cards, 8 playable heroes, the whole gamut. And we released last year on Steam. So I'm up here talking to you today, but there are also a couple other people that require a shout out. So that's my co-founders and counterparts, Blake Mitzi and Ty Kerry. So they're, along with myself, key creatives on Armello and help figure out the strategy and everything for our studio. And a lot of what I'm talking about today is largely responsible, they're largely responsible for as well. So I just wanted to give them a little shout out. Okay, also being from one of the world's most livable cities in the world and being a young white male, there's a lot of privileges that I am afforded that unfortunately other people aren't. So this is sort of a talk of how we went about achieving success. So I acknowledge that it might not be as easy a path for other people. So imagine the Australian games industry around circa 2007, 2005, mid-2000s. This is what it looked like. A bunch of very large ships moving throughout the industry, taking third-party projects and just going about their thing every 6 to 7 years. Some waves would come in and they'd be able to spin the ship around and take on those waves. Come 2009, this is really what happened to those studios. And a lot of people just fell in the water and drowned and lost their jobs in games. Well over half, I reckon, of the Australian games industry lost their jobs in 2009 when a number of huge high-profile studios shut down. And you can see some people off here in the distance running away. This is me, essentially trying to hold on to my job in video games. I remained at one of the studios that stuck around for a while, called Taurus Games. I was the design director there. But I could feel myself slipping from the industry, and it wasn't a really good feeling. But I guess this is probably a more apt description of me. I'm the raccoon there, as opposed to the other one. So I left and I went out on my own. I did a bit of consultancy. I did some design contract jobs. I was working with the film industry, helping them figure out what games are all about, and consulting to government. But it drove me a little bit stir crazy. I wanted to get back into games. So I went overseas to the States and I was interviewing for a bunch of jobs and everything after this global financial crisis had disrupted the games industry in Australia. And I was over there looking for jobs, big jobs, large, high-profile design gigs all around the world and interviewing at some of the biggest studios there were. But I was noticing a trend as well. This is an article from Gama Sutra talking about the 2011 Independent Games Festival and the number of entrants that was happening. Indie games are exploding, and you can see here that there are a record number of entrants, and this record is continually broken every single year. So, and this year, over 400 game entries, or just under. And I realized that there were people out there that had gotten in their little ships after the industry crashed all around the world, and there were these little agile squads that were able to go out and weather all of these changes. There were waves now coming in from all different angles. We had the disruption of games because of the mobile, the advent of mobile and iPhone and the App Store, a bunch of different reasons for it all collapsing, but these folk were able to weather it. And then while I'm putting these puzzle pieces together, I was really keen on this game called Bastion. It was just keeping tabs on it, developed by Supergiant Games, just a game that I was into. I was really amazed by sort of the scope of what they were doing and everything, and the quality of it. It seemed quite polished and unique concepts. And all this time, there's an idea kicking around in my head that, maybe I didn't need to take one of these big jobs. I was thinking, why do I want a big job? Why do I want to be creative director of Ubi Montreal or lead designer at Blizzard or, all these huge jobs leading huge teams? And a good friend of mine, Jacek Tuszewski, who was at League of Geeks, said to me, before League of Geeks was even around, he said, why do you want these jobs? You don't want to be a small cog in a big wheel. And I thought about it, and it was that I just wanted to collaborate with the most talented people around. And really, when I thought long and hard about it, that's what games were to me. It wasn't that I was totally in love with the medium and that was the reason I was there. It was I just wanted to create and collaborate with incredibly talented folk. And then going back to Bastion, while all these things are sort of floating around and I'm thinking about maybe I could do an indie thing, maybe how can I work with these people? But I don't want to make a little mobile game, or I don't have any money and all this sort of stuff. It hit me when I saw an interview with Greg Cassavan, the creative director over at Supergiant Games, and he said that there were only 7 people developing Bastion and that they'd all come from ex-studio gigs like myself and some other talented folk I knew. They were kind of like an A team, I guess you could say, of all these indies. And it just clicked. Everything sort of fell into place, and I realized that the time was now and that it was totally feasible with the advent of free video game engines, online production tools, and a bunch of other things happening in just the web communities around development exploding, a lot of displaced, incredibly talented people. And then also digital distribution platforms so we could distribute our own titles, that it was totally possible to make a mid-scope, independent game that was incredibly high quality and could be incredibly commercially successful. But there was still this problem that we didn't have any money. I think I had about $40 in my bank account at the time, having quit my job. And it's a funny thing about money, if you have some really great ideas and you want to get them off the ground, but you don't have any money, this is essentially the response that you get a lot of the time. But I thought about it more and more, and there was one thing that we did have, even though we didn't have money, and that was capital. A lot of people don't think about this, but you may not have cold hard cash or digits in your bank account, but everyone has inherent capital. And there are different ways that you can leverage that capital so that it has the exact same value as actual money. And so our experience, our contacts with a bunch of known collaborators, incredibly talented people, our ability to get a cool concept going and prototype it and know that it would be strong lent us a whole lot of capital to kick something off. And so I had this idea for a points model where anyone could contribute to the project, and if they completed a task, they would get a number of points assigned to them, and at the end, there would be a profit share. And I didn't really know how it was going to work, but I knew that it was possible, that there was a way, and that it just needed figuring out. So we sort of got the band together. I went out to a couple of people like Ty and Blake and a few others, and I said, hey, we're going to do this thing. Are you in? It's a little bit crazy. And they were like, yeah, let's do it. And so we kicked off League of Geeks. And so we were essentially a little video game development collective based out of Melbourne, but wanting to work with people all around the world. And the idea was simple, was that we were going to take our spare time and work out of hours on a title that was a passion project for us. It wasn't to get super rich or anything like that. It was just, we wanted to make something really cool, and we wanted to work with incredibly talented people. So I laid out, I guess, a mission statement or a philosophy that we would remain independent whilst owning everything, that we were trying to make our dream game to the scale that we wanted, and that it was going to be at a quality level that was world-class, and that all of the developers would share in the profit, not just the people heading up the project. Another thing that was really important to us was that I strongly believed that hitting the 3 C's, as we call them, is incredibly achievable. It's just how you go about it, the types of projects that you choose, how you market them and everything. And so the 3 C's that we talk about at League of Geeks, that all of our titles need to hit, are games that are a cultural success. So they push the medium forward in some way. They contribute to games as an art form. They're a critical success as well, that our peers, that the press, that players consider them objectively good games. And that also they're a commercial success too. So they can actually enable us to continue to be financially and creatively independent and create more games for more people. And this is totally possible. A lot of people sort of see this as a pipe dream, and I don't know why. Obviously, it's not an easy thing to do, but it's something that should totally be strived for and can. And there are numerous examples out there. So we had our objective. We knew that there was a big fish out there, this legend of this game with the 3 C's, and that everyone was going to share in the profit, and we were going to give it a shot. So we started to do it. We'd work our full-time day jobs, and at night we'd come home and we'd get together these ideas for these scrappy games. And we started to form a company, we did all the admin stuff, and we were talking about slowly what games we wanted to make. And there was something happening on, the iPad had just come out, and there was something happening on the App Store there where there was a category called board games. And we were totally into tabletop games, all of us. At League of Geeks, we used to role play together and everything, Dungeons and Dragons style stuff. And we thought the games in this board game category, these digital tabletop games are atrocious. This is 6 years ago or something now. And, you know, as developers and tabletop players, frankly, they're pretty insulting. We can come into this area and we can just absolutely dominate and deliver the full potential of this genre. And so that's what we did. We spent 10 months prototyping on paper. This is Yatsek sitting around on one of the final versions. You can see it's incredibly complex. Looks like someone playing Mage Knight. But we were developing this game, Armello, for digital platforms all along. So we wanted to create a tabletop game specifically designed for digital platforms. It went through a number of iterations, and we got together all these little scrappy parts, and Blake worked at a real estate agent at the time, and so he had access to like industrial size printers. And we just worked our way through concepting the game while we were also building out the world, figuring out the brand. We knew that we wanted Armello to be a huge brand, like something that could have movies or comic books written about it, that it could be timeless as well and be cross-cultural, that people in China could enjoy it and it would resonate with them as much as some kid sitting in Seattle. So we went through developing and designing all of this. Ty led a bunch of the aesthetics while Blake and myself, I filled out the world, and Blake and myself did a bunch of the designs, Blake leading systems. This is the game design document. And all of this was happening before we had an actual team. There was not even a single coder on the team yet. We were just doing all the high-level concept stuff, figuring out the game, what it was. And at the end of those 10 months, Armello was born. We knew what was happening. So it was time now for us to leverage that capital that we had and go and get some funding. So luckily for us in Australia, we have fantastic video game funding, especially in the state of Victoria. Screen Australia cut national funding on video games, so they don't get a shout out today, but Film Victoria are awesome. They helped us out a bunch, and we went through and we got some funding to basically announce the game and spend it on a trailer. I have a trailer here, but there's no audio, so I won't play it, but you can look up Armello debut trailer on YouTube. We do these beautiful 2D animated trailers, and that was how we announced the game. No gameplay or anything, just the brand and the tone. And people got it. Immediately, the announcement was a huge success. We were nobodies from Melbourne, Australia. Had never really developed a game outside of the numerous licensed products that we'd done in the capacity at our studio gigs. But it sort of spread like wildfire, this idea of the game, this Game of Thrones, but with animals. And everyone was really trying to figure out what it was while sort of getting super hyped and spreading the word. We got covered by some of the biggest sites out there, and we knew that the game had some legs. Now, there are a number of things that we did. I think one of the things throughout our success that has been considerably well done and that we've sort of knocked out of the park would definitely be our ability to market Armello, being a scrappy little indie developer and spreading the word like wildfire. So just like a quick digression, some points that I think for any of you wanting to market your indie games, things that have definitely worked for us. One of them is that we picked our guardians. So instead of trying to hit every press outlet ever and have a personal dialogue with the main, with just small blogs in Philadelphia or whatever it may be, we picked our guardians. We picked 10 top sites that we wanted to target, that we felt were the biggest and most relevant to Armello and spoke to our user base. And we just marketed to them. We gave them leads on things. We gave them exclusive assets and stories, personally tailored stories to them with every press release that would fitted their market and their writers' interests. Oh, there's a lectern there. We also spent a lot of time. I've traveled over 250,000 miles with this game. I've been away for 5 weeks. Currently, I've been at Gamescom, Netherlands, Stockholm, PAX West, and now here. And this has been critical to our success. Being a little studio or a collective in Melbourne, we never would have had the success that we've had now if I didn't just get on a plane and go and meet these people and build personal relationships with the press. Also, be bold. Now, again, I have a video for this, but there's no audio, so I won't show it. But essentially, in PAX East 2014, our Kickstarter was happening, and I went to PAX just to spruik the game. I didn't think that we'd have a build ready, but it turns out that we did, and we just missed our opportunity to exhibit. So I'm there at PAX East, and there's a couple of empty booths there. So we just crashed them, and we just set up our game, emailed the press, and told them that we were there. And it's these sort of things, like these sort of moments where we just took the initiative and led and were bold and took a leap of faith that really worked out for us. That was one of the most successful Kickstarter marketing beats that we did during the entire campaign. Collaborate. A lot of people will write to the press and say, hey, write about my cool game because it's cool. You want to do that. But really what you want to do is see your relationship with the press as a collaboration. They have interests, they have goals, they have readers who have particular interests as well. Work with them on the best story for your game. Don't waste their time. Again, don't waste people's time. That's the biggest one. We were just at PAX West. Some of the industry's leading press were there. And we didn't reach out to any of them, essentially, because right now we don't really have a marketing beat to talk to them. And when there's 500 other games on the show floor, it's better that when they come by the booth, I just say hello, shake their hand, ask them how they're going, as opposed to trying to pitch them on a story that isn't really there. There'll always be another time for that. So all of these things led to everyone getting super hyped about Armello, but now it was time to get that team and find them. So we went out in search of our people with thinking about our ideals and what we wanted and running it past them, and people seemed pretty interested. I mean, we had that capital there of a title, like this whole package, pitching Armello, what it was. We had a prototype that we could actually sit them down and they could play. And then we thought, well, let's get this all condensed into one thing. So we created an info pack. I sat there and I typed it up and we rolled it into a PDF and it just said who we are, what we're about, and what the game was. And we sent this out to our heroes in game development, the people all around the world, whether it be in games or whatever, that we wanted to work with. It broke down our profit share system and spoke about all of that. As well as this, we had all of our lore stuff figured out. So a lot of people try and shy away from this. They feel it's not game development. They just want to continue writing the code. But if you want to achieve those 3 C's with your project, it's super important to get this stuff out of the way, especially when you're asking people to work for deferred payment. So we spent a bunch of time on legals. And so when we went to people, instead of saying, hey, work on my awesome, soon-to-be successful mega game, trust me, it's all going to work out, we were able to hand them a document and say, hey, look at this. Like, you're safe, you're totally protected, it is going to work out. So essentially what we were pitching them with was for them to come on for deferred payment for this profit share system. So this is how that worked. When revenue came in for the game, first thing that came out would be distributors and investors. So things like Steam or Indie Fund that invested in Armello, and then expenses, so people's wages or machine costs or whatever it might be. And then everything after that is obviously profit. And then the profit was divided up like this. Initially, it was that 15% would go to log, 35% would go to the directors, and 50% would go to the pool. In the end, the directors decided to just sacrifice their share, and 50% went to League of Geeks for future projects and maintenance of the studio and things like that. And then 50% of the profit went to what we called this labor compensation pool. And so how the point system would work is that we would get a task and we would assign it a number of points. So say you have a card illustration, we would give it 6 points, then we would consult one of our collaborators, one of our artists, and say, does this sound about right? And they go, yeah, that sounds cool. Then a director would assign the task to them, and then the collaborator finish the tasks, and if it's up to scratch and the quality bar that we need, we would approve that work, and then the contractor receives their 6 points. So say, for example, the project had 1,000 points total at the end by the time we launched and it was commercialized. So that's 10 tasks at 10 points. 1,000 points total, but then this contributor had done 10 tasks at 10 points. That means they have 100 points. So that person gets 10% profit share. So that's 10% of that 50%. And when we pitched this to everyone, we weren't sure what people were going to think, how it was going to go, but with the info pack there, the game prototyped out so they could sit down and play it, a strong brand, we had partners on board to do marketing and everything, and then this profit share system with all of the legals backing it up, everyone basically said yes. It was it was kind of both mind-blowing, but then at the same time, incredibly terrifying. And they were incredibly talented people too. We had Disney illustrators and storyboard artists. We had people working in the film industry on huge titles. We had special effects masters from Weta. We had people working on huge AAA games as well that were doing this during the day and then at night coming home working on Armello. And then, of course, we had some award-winning indie developers. And then, too, we got Academy Award-winning composer Lisa Gerard to work with our composer Michael Allen, which was her video game debut. And all of these people were working for a deferred payment on the promise of profit share, just because we'd gone about setting it up right. And they were all around the world. We wanted to work with the best people in the world. And so to do that, we had to have a distributed production model. And so out of everywhere in the world, we were based in Melbourne, but everyone else in the project was based all around the place. Like you can see them dotted all around Australia and then all around the US and Asia. And so this is the first ever, so remember, as I said, this entire time that we were setting it up, we never had any coders on board. So these are some of the first prototypes as they were coming along when we were taking the board game back into a digital platform. You can see things really early on in there like clouds, because we knew the game worked because we were playing it on paper, but this was more so about seeing if we could bring tabletop games to life on a digital platform. So all of this was happening with all of these people around the world. I was leading this project along with Ty and Blake from my bedroom and them in their studies or their bedrooms as well, coming home at night doing this. This is, and it has its perks, right? Like this is John Seatsma, my former director at League of Geeks. This is one of his days in the office just typing away in the Hanoi Swing Club in Vietnam. But to do this, we needed to stay on the bleeding edge of technology. That was the thing that permitted us to be able to do this. When we started, it was Google Wave, RIP, that essentially enabled us to work in a distributed fashion. Then we moved to Trello, Teambox, Pivotal Tracker, and Slack. And that's what we're using now, Pivotal Tracker and Slack. Pivotal for project management and Slack for communications. And we still have some team members spotted around the world. But of course, working around the world out of hours, it's essentially like working two jobs. Communication can get tough, so it's quite easy to burn out, and we did, often. And things got really dark at one point. Just before we did the Kickstarter, late 2013, we'd been working on the project for a couple of years, and things were really tense. So we went to Film Victoria again, and we said, hey, get us some money. We just want to get to Kickstarter. We want to get to Alpha so we can go to Kickstarter and ask for a bunch of cash. We went into this place called The Arcade. It had just opened up. We were one of the first studios to go in there. It's a co-working space in Melbourne. Over 130 game developers there now across 30 studios or something. It's something like 40% of the Australian games industry is actually in this building. It's absolutely incredible. We're one of the largest studios in there now. But we spent 6 weeks in there just working on, just me and 3 coders, working on keeping the engine room of this game running, so that it wouldn't die. It was basically do or die at this point. And then when we were ready, we launched our Kickstarter, and we passed the goal by about $100,000. And when all was said and done, we ended up with about $350,000 US. So that was a huge success and essentially enabled a few of us to get into the studio. One of the things that we found was that being distributed, that code didn't really working in that fashion, like having programming work under that model. So we knew we needed to get an engine room of programmers and production so that everyone else around the world could just have their work as soon as it was done, put into the build and keep morale high. We did the Kickstarter pretty cleverly. There were a bunch of things that we gamed through about 6 months of research and crazy spreadsheets and data analysis. We were able to do things that are just unheard of, like pushing. This is our 50. That middle spike that you can see there. That's our $50 tier. And so to have an average pledge of $50 is just absolutely unheard of on Kickstarter. But it was tough as well. This is Alex Schwartz from Alchemy Labs, and when we started, he said, "Welcome to the 30 days of despair." And you can see from this photo where I'm actually about to die. That was for a Reddit AMA, and yeah, it's like the worst photo that's ever taken of me ever. I basically went to bed for like a week after this. I felt deathly ill. It's one of the hardest things we've ever done at Kickstarter. Then we went to early access, and we brought to it this fusion of a bunch of other ideas that traveling the world and speaking to other indie devs had brought us, where we would do branded updates. And we were named one of the studios that, one of the only studios in the world doing early access right. And we saw early access just grow and grow and grow through doing these free branded updates that we would bring content and tease them out. So this is Engines of Fate, where we redid the quest system and a bunch of other stuff. And people just loved it. And a whole part of this, one of the things that we were thinking about all the time, this is Tony Goodman, and something that he said in a Gama Sutra article is that a common tactic of publishers was to drag out negotiations until developers ran out of money. So this is back in the days of Age of Empires, back in the 2000s, I imagine it would be, or late 90s. A deal signed under those circumstances will result in very unfavorable terms. We didn't have to take the first deal that publishers offered. Eventually, Microsoft tired of negotiating and gave us the deal we wanted. Throughout this entire time, especially when we went to Kickstarter and were having success on early access, partners were approaching us left and right to publish the game, to work with us in some way. But because we'd set up this model that enabled us to work with complete financial independence, we were never beholden to any partners in any discussion, and it essentially gave us a bunch of power in those conversations. And relationships was something that we were especially good at. And I believe we still are at League of Geeks. We have fantastic relationships with a number of partners. And I think it is because we always try and work towards a mutually beneficial arrangement, as opposed to us being in a position where we're totally beholden or reliant to them, or vice versa. So towards the end of the project, after we'd done the Kickstarter and early access, we went to Indie Fund and we asked them if we could get just a small amount of money to give us hit some more items on our marketing wish list. And they obliged, thanks to them. And in September 1st, 2015, we launched Armello. We hit the front page on Steam top sellers. We sold incredibly well on PS4 as well. We launched on both Steam and PS4, PC, Mac, and Linux. And the game has just been received incredibly well. So not only was it a commercial success, but also a critical success. And then on top of that, the game is considered to be one of the best digital board games out there, really solidifying the genre or the genre's place amongst video games today. But this point system, how does it all shake out, right? So now we've released the game, it's been commercially successful. There's a bunch of people who've been working for free for almost 5 years. So we've got to make sure that they get their cash. So the game, by end of 2015, the first quarter, the game had made about $1.5 million. The game cost about $1.5 million. We'd made about $2 million. And then, so that leaves us with a profit of $500K. And then, of course, that gives us $250,000 for the log contributors pool to hand out via profit share. So by the end of the project, there were actually 12,000 points total. So if you think about a point as about an hour's worth of work, that means that there's about 12,000 hours worth of free work that was done on the game, or for deferred payment. So if there's $250,000 worth of profit share, that's about $20 a point. So about $20 an hour is the rate that even just after one quarter that people were getting paid. But how many people was this across? So there were 46 contributors in total, and some of these maybe just did one piece of card art or two pieces of card art, and some people worked on the project for, like I said, 4 years off and on in their spare time. So the smallest payment that went out in that first quarter was about $300. The biggest was about $18,000, but the average was about 5 to 10K. But that was these numbers that you're looking at now. That was at the end of March. Oh, sorry, at the end of last year. So not even now. I think it was actually just a few months ago. So around the 6 to 8 month mark, we've actually got about $500,000 worth of profit share that we've handed out. So you can see that just in 6 to 8 months that after launch, that the value of every hour's worth of work has gone up to $40. And this will continue to go on forever. People who work on Armello, the profit share system is actually unending. So as long as the game Armello is making money and any ports or any DLC or anything like that, then people who worked on Armello will continue to get money, and their value per point will continue to increase. Where I stand today, I haven't checked the numbers, but where we stand today, obviously that $40 per point would be higher even today. So all these people that said yes to us, we did have a couple of no's along the way. They're obviously pretty happy right about now that it all worked out. And all of us, we at League of Geeks, we got to catch our big fish. But what about now? So that was Armello. That was the game that we set out to make, and now we have this successful game, we have this profit share system that worked, but now we have a studio of about 12 people there. We never really planned on that when we first got together to make the game. It was just a passion project, and there was 3 of us or 4 of us, and we thought, well, let's see how it goes. But since then, we've been able to assist other devs. So this is Push Me Pull You, developed by a studio in Melbourne called House. It's their debut game, and they were just in a position where their game sort of blew up and they needed a bunch of assistance to get it onto PS4 and Steam and navigate what it means to sort of begin a games company. And so we partnered up with them and co-developed the game, brought them under our wing, and essentially acted as their big brother studio in getting this game out there. And that's been incredibly critically successful with, you can see all of these awards there on the left. It's also a very, very weird game. And here's the thing, we got to achieve all of these things, remaining independent whilst owning everything, making your dream game to the scale you want at a quality level that's world class, and all of our developers have shared in the profit. And now we've got a game that we're supporting. We're continuing our branded updates. We've got a number of users up there. We're refocusing our platforms. We're working with Steam closely to lead a bunch of initiatives with their tech on the Steam platform. And we're going around the world helping other developers realize the potential that is out there if you just look at things in a very different way. I mean, it doesn't matter what your goals are. Like, your goals can be wildly different to ours. But if you take your goals and you figure out a roadmap on the way there, or look at things in just from a slightly different angle, you don't take no for an answer. You don't see roadblocks, you see hurdles instead. You look for the way around it. There's really a way to achieve what you want to do. Find those, make a game that has the 3 C's, keep your integrity, and whatever that may be. And then also just keep your little crew moving through these seas and weathering all the storms, however they may come. So some takeaways about how we got here. All right, so relationships is a big one. I said that we have a big focus on that at League of Geeks, and we have fantastic relationships with a number of partners around the globe. It's so incredibly important. I mean, so much of our success is attributed to the quality and the level of the relationships that we have with all of these partners around the globe. I mean, you can't be a studio of just 12 people based in Melbourne, Australia, and have an international success without leveraging, or I shouldn't say have, but maybe guarantee or secure an international success without leveraging other people who have incredible reach. We partnered up with Sony to use their marketing power to get onto their platform. We worked with people like Intel, just something like having a fantastic relationship with Intel and getting them to tweet out to their 2 million followers or whatever on Twitter. Things like that really help. It all contributes. Language is everything. So we had a game where we went to Kickstarter, then we had a backer beta, and then we did early access, and now we're on Steam, and it's a multiplayer game, and we're continually updating it, working with the community. How we speak about our game, how we engage with our community is incredibly important. But it's not just externally, it's also internally too. From the very start, when we started Armello, I would never say, hey, do you want to work on my game? It would be like, hey, let's make a game together. And it would always be we, or it would always be wow. The ownership, these collaborators, even if they were on the other side of the world and they only worked on the game for 10 hours, it's still their game. They're still invited to everything that we do. They still get regular updates about what's going on. It's very much about being inclusive. Make the experience of others your own. Some people say, fail fast. I say, fuck that. There is so much wisdom out there. Like, we're not, like Tan said, people who were making games in 1978, there are a bunch of problems that were solved then, or a bunch of failures that were had then that people have been talking about for years and years. You're not the first person to do all the things that you think you're the first person to do. Find the people that have done it before. Find the things that worked for them that didn't. Before we went to early access, I hit up a bunch of developers from all around the world that had failures and successes on early access, and we Skyped with them for about an hour each and filled an entire spreadsheet full of questions and answers about how they went about it. And that was what informed our strategy for early access that led to people saying we're one of the only studios that did early access right. Ownership amongst a team, sort of what I was touching on before. This is incredibly important. Your team needs to feel like they have ownership in what they're doing. Now, you might just talk about that in regards to giving someone the ability to write a design brief for something or design a little section, give your gameplay programmer ownership of a particular feature. But take it a step further. Really try and find ways that you can actually bring your studio into the fold, your employees into the fold, your collaborators into the fold. We literally give 50% of our profit away to our team every quarter. I mean, we just take the bank account basically and cut it in half and we hand it out. And I mean, that's crazy, right? Like, I shouldn't be up on this stage talking to you while there's 12 people at home tapping away on keyboards still getting paid. But if that's what you're committed to, there's a way to make it work. There's always a way. And the rewards that we get for creating that type of ownership are just huge. We have staff that probably literally die for us. Not that I would ever want that. Leverage your strengths. Again, like I said, we didn't have any money, but we knew that our strengths were, so Ty, myself, and Blake worked on the original concept team at a studio in Australia. So we knew that we could create strong original concepts. Ty's been a digital illustrator and art director for 10, 15 years. And before that, he was a graphic designer. I'm a writer. I've been building worlds for I don't know how long and been writing marketing copy, networking my ass off in corporate fields. And Blake is a systems designer, we just have that holy trinity of being able to create a strong brand, a strong concept, and then being able to market it. We're not tech savvy. So we lent into that at first. We were like, let's get our strengths down, let's get a core concept and figure out a way to bring these other people on board. Pay attention. This is a huge one. So many people will just coast through, with blinkers on, making their own games, not thinking about what's going on around them, what other games are failing. You can literally see examples of a game just tanking and then people just following it off the cliff. Another example is all those people making AR games now because of Pokemon Go. I mean, it's not a really wise thing if you're paying attention. Understand every failure. This is huge. So something that I'm really proud of at League of Geeks is Blake said to me during the conversation, it really feels like we're the crappest studio, the shittiest studio that has ever been around internally. We're very self-critical. We're very damning of our own faults and how we can improve. But something that we are incredibly proud of is that we don't seem to be talking about the same problems 2 months later. There always seem to be new problems. And I think it's because whenever we fail, we try to understand why that is. We try and build upon it. And we try and understand it from every angle, both externally, internally. And it's part of moving forward and building upon the studio. But more importantly than that is celebrating every victory. So we had 46 contributors all around the world. And whether it was just we got an article on Kotaku or the Kickstarter made $350,000 or some fan just wrote a nice thing on the internet somewhere, we would celebrate that. I would send it to people. We would give ourselves a little pat on the back. And these are the things that keep you going through. I mean, we worked on this game for over 5 years, out of hours, essentially in crunch for a large part of it. There were dark times. There were numerous times when I was just crying at my desk thinking it wasn't ever possible and what had I done? I'd ruined my career at like 26. But these things really help you get you through. Is those reminders, when you celebrate every victory, it really makes a difference in helping you reach that end goal, seeing the light at the end of the tunnel and helping you achieve whatever your goals may be in this crazy world of independent video games. And that's me. If anyone ever wants to reach out or anything, has any questions, feel free to email me at trent@leagueofgeeks.com. We're happy to share any of our successes or failures or wisdom or advice that you feel we may have. And of course, follow me on Twitter. All right, thanks everyone.
예, 그럼 지금부터 11시 50분까지 휴식 시간을